Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee to order. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We should have it, the flag in our view momentarily. Here we go, we'll stand. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I will announce that this meeting's being live streamed this evening and it's also being recorded courtesy of Templeton Community TV. So thank you very much for handling some of the technological logistics for us. We truly appreciate that. This video, as I said, in addition to being live streamed, will be recorded and available for viewing after the fact. The first order of business is the approval of our meeting minutes from March 25th, 2020. When someone is ready, I would take a motion to approve the minutes. If I could just ask whoever makes the motion, if you could say your name and then give the motion. This way it makes it easier for the public to see who's making the motion, as well as for keeping the minutes.
Vicky Chartier, I make the motion we approve our bills and payroll.
Oh, this was the meeting minutes.
Yep, the minutes, that too.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mrs. Chartier to approve the meeting minutes of March 25th, 2020. Do I have a second?
Lori Matson, second.
And I have a second by Mrs. Matson. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, I would ask the committee to unmute themselves because we do need to do roll call. Mrs. Matson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mr. Mason, you're muted. Ooh, let's see, can we get him unmuted? Let's see.
I think the meeting host can unmute anyone.
I see he's unmuted now. Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Marks, and you need to unmute.
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says aye, so we have unanimous.
I'm here too, Margaret. I don't know why I'm not showing up.
Okay, maybe we could get her the name of, instead of the mysterious 055129.
Oh, that's me. That would be me.
So Mrs. Kojal, how do you vote?
I say yes.
Okay, and I don't know if you see in the bottom left of your screen, you can enable the video if you'd like.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. And I don't know, Mrs. Varney, I know you were pretty good at changing names, if you might be able to figure out how to change.
I'm not a host.
Deb should be able to do it at the top right,
Okay.
those semicolons, but with the dots. It says rename.
Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to undo the video thing. It won't do it. Oh, man. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'll rechange your name.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on while we get Mrs. Kojal's name changed. The next item of business is to recommend the acceptance of the bills and payrolls and warrants as presented.
I make a motion we accept the bills and the payroll warrants.
That would be Mrs. Chartier making the motion. Do I have a second?
I second. This is Mr. Marks.
Mr. Mark seconds. Do I have any
I
questions?
literally cannot hear a thing. This is terrible.
You can't hear a thing?
Okay.
Can you hear now, Dr. Casavant?
His computer doesn't seem to have working volume, so he's going to be sitting out, or trying to sit in the same room so he can hear from my
I
computer.
can hear, I know that you can hear me. I'm not, the sound is not coming through the speakers of my computer for some reason. So we'll do our best, but I'll sit close enough so not to give, so I can hear what's being said, but not to give too much feedback. Because if you sit too close, that's what happens. So we'll figure it out.
Can you leave the meeting and come back in?
I'm going to give it a shot. So why don't I do that? And
I'm gonna try too.
I'll be right back.
Okay. So if we'll take just a moment to let Dr. Kazavant come back in. I see Mrs. Kojal is up there with the correct name now.
1 second.
Yeah. No picture, that's good.
058, okay. 058203.
Okay, can you hear anything now, Dr. Kazavant?
No. So what I'll do is I will just listen as best I can through Ms. Varney's computer, which is sitting off to the side. So we'll go like that for now.
Thank you. All right, so I have a motion on the floor to accept the bills and payrolls as presented by Mrs. Chartier and Mr. Mark seconded. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, if I could make sure the committee unmutes themselves, I'll do roll call. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mrs. Robichaud? And was that a yes? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Kojal?
Yes,
And I see Mrs. Trifilo has joined.
Yeah, so vote on the minutes. I read them this afternoon. I'm all set.
Okay, and we're doing a vote on the bills and payroll right now?
Oh, bills and payroll, I'll say yes to that too.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So we have unanimous on bills and payroll.
I'm gonna go back in and read.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is our student representative report. So I'll just ask everybody to mute themselves except for our student reps and allow them to report.
Go ahead,
Okay. So just some general things that
What's
are going
going on?
on. Obviously, we're not in school. Lots of students are making a really valiant effort to keep socially distanced, flattening the curve. So outside of school, lots of things have been going on to try and keep morales high. So we have virtual spirit weeks going on. We have senior celebrations where seniors are posting on social media what they're doing next year so we can all celebrate it. So that's kind of what's been going on.
I know Friday there's supposed to be the parade, which I'm extremely excited about to see everybody with all the buses and all the teachers and administration. So that's going to be really exciting.
So in regards to remote learning, things have been coming together this week. It's definitely been different, but we're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. The administration and teachers have worked really hard to kind of develop our remote learning plan. But on the student side, things are really starting to come together now that we have kind of started our Zoom schedule. So we have times to meet with the class, with the teachers to reach out and to get some work done. So it's really exciting to see everybody.
Yeah. Obviously, it's difficult because it's hard to ensure communication and equitability across all, thousands of students in the district. But just having the connection, not only educationally, but socially is really, really beneficial to a lot of students.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you so much for your report, and James. Does anybody have any questions or comments for the students at this time? Nope, seeing none. I will move on. Our next item on the agenda is the NDEA. I see we have Mr. Iben and Mrs. Parker here. If you would like to give us an update on how things are going.
All right, well, it's been a busy week for everybody as the remote learning is rolled out. I've seen teachers who are trying for the first time methods they haven't tried before. It's a learning curve. For those of us that are a little more used to the technology, it's been a fun way to sort of experiment with contact. Participation with the kids varies based on the day and the time. But I can say all the teachers are working, as far as I know, very hard to deliver some sort of content and contact with their students. Some are really starting to stress out because they have that own internal need to do their job, but at the same time, they've got their 3 kids at home. So I'm getting a lot of emails from teachers who are going, I don't know how I can continue to maintain taking care of the family full-time during the day and teaching full-time during the day. So everyone's trying to find that balance. But I just wanted the committee to know that while they're working their tails off, especially our special ed teachers who have such a unique role to play, and to play it virtually, say they're a therapist or a clinician, try delivering that therapy or clinical need to a student via a method like this can be really challenging. So I don't know if Lisa has anything she wants to add.
I just want to add that a lot of the teachers, we've been all working collaboratively to keep each other going. And there's a lot of elementary teachers who have not ever been very good with technology, or so they thought, and they've really pulled it together in Google Classroom, putting assignments on there. And I'm just so impressed with just the forthcoming of everybody's efforts and working together and supporting each other throughout the district.
Great, thank you so much. And please forward along, I think I can speak on behalf of the committee, the appreciation we have for the efforts that everyone, administration, teachers, our paras, everybody, the secretaries, the custodians, everybody has really done a phenomenal job stepping up and just meeting these challenges head on. I have 2 kids of my own, so I do see with some of the teachers they have, it is remarkable that we have asked everybody to stop and turn on a dime, and people have done so gracefully.
And just a shout out to the food service people, Ed and his crew. They've done an amazing job getting meals prepared too. I've been out on the deliveries, and it's just so wonderful to see everything that they do.
That's great. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So again, thank you to the both of you, and please pass that message along that everyone's efforts are appreciated. And contact is the biggest thing that we need. Our kids need to know that there's people out there that care, and the learning will happen. It will happen eventually, but it's just amazing that we have such a wonderful staff that feels that connection and wants to maintain it. So thank them. That's awesome. All right. Any comments by the committee? Anyone want to say anything? Okay. With that, we will go on to, I'm sorry, I got my agenda here printed out of order. All right. We had, we should have public comment next, but what did I do to that page? So bear with me a second, I'm sorry. Can I skip over it? Yes, I apologize. I skipped over our public input section, which should have happened right after our student representatives. So I will go to the public input at this point. We did solicit anyone who wanted to prepare a statement to the committee to be read during public input. And I'll just confirm with Mrs. Varney, as I knew at about just after 4 o'clock, we had not received anything. I will check in with Mrs. Varney and just make sure that that's still the case.
It is still the case, and I'm looking at the YouTube, the live stream right now, and there are no comments at this point.
Okay, and I'm actually going to give just a minute. I know there's a little bit of a lag.
Yeah, 20 seconds, I think I said, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll give maybe another 15 seconds just to see if there's anybody that wanted to type something into that YouTube chat feature that we could read, to make sure that we don't move on and not give anyone the opportunity to do so. I will say that if there is any questions or comments that anyone has, feel free to email the school committee, forward them to Mrs. Varney, who can then disperse them to the committee, forward any comments to Dr. Casavant as well. And we will certainly get back to you when we can with comments or whatever we need to respond to you. So I don't see anything come in. Is that correct, Mrs. Varney? We still clear?
Correct.
So at this point, I don't see any public comments. So we will move on. And next up, I will turn the floor over to Dr. Casavant for probably the bulk of our discussion this evening, which is going to be an update on the coronavirus situation and what we're doing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. We're trying to figure this out. I can barely hear folks, so we'll see how it goes. I think I certainly will echo Mr. Ivan. It's people are working very hard. This is very different. We rolled out the plan really this week, our remote learning plan, and in earnest. And look, we are. I think we're doing very well, quite frankly. The feedback that I've received is, that people are being connected with. I know, again, I have a 7th grader in my home. I see the Google Classroom invites roll in. I see the work. It looks very different. It is completely different than what we're used to doing. So but I'll tell you, for something that's brand new, our folks have done an excellent job with that. But we're still figuring out a few things. So with that, we continue and move forward, and we're in constant communication with each other. So whatever needs to be, fixed or modified, otherwise we kind of fix it as we go. In terms of the things that we've been doing all along, which of course is providing our lunches to our students and to our community, we have continued to do that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I would have to ask. I'm not sure what the meal counts are up to now, Ms. Geister, but give or take overall, it was 90 meals today, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
We're doing approximately 90 meals a day, three days a week. So it's like 270 a week, and this is week 5. So well over 1,000 meals have been dispersed.
So, that obviously from the very beginning, it was our focus to make sure that we took care of the most basic of needs, and certainly food is one of them. In other news, over the past 2 weeks, we distributed close to, I believe, 100 Chromebooks on the first wave to students and to families who needed them. And we have a second wave of handout coming up this Thursday, which, utilizing a survey, we figured that's how we garnered the information of who needed what. It certainly isn't a one-to-one kind of offer. What we're trying to do is, we understand that families may have, say, 3 kids and they have 1 Chromebook or whatever. So we're trying to, assist where we can, and we'll know more as we get closer to, well, tomorrow, but folks, it's all online. They sign basically an understanding about how to use the Chromebook, take care of the Chromebook, etc. They will drive up, and we will, by name, hand them out as we go. So we're trying to, of course, assist our students and our families with the technology that they need to at least access some of the resources that we have that we're offering. Folks who did not have any type of internet whatsoever, when we put out the initial blast email and also text and phone call, we had folks who did not have reliable internet contact us here at central office, and then we forwarded that information to the individual schools so that could, so we could take care of that. We're still receiving guidance as the day goes on, quite frankly, on a lot of fronts, whether it be financial, the implications of, that, of course, it's hitting the entire country, but how does it affect schools, and how does it affect regionals, which is a big difference in a lot of ways. Busing seems to be an issue that we're trying to figure out, exactly with reimbursements. We had a statewide meeting yesterday, which was almost 3.5 hours long. It was you know, it was hard to listen to the entire thing. There were some technical difficulties, et cetera. But, you know, what they're trying to do is roll out as much information, but we're noticing that that is, you know, that is changing as time moves on. So, you know, I'll continue to update the committee as we go. There will be a need, quite frankly, in the next week or two to have a finance subcommittee meeting so we can discuss, you know, about transportation, you know, whether it be sped or otherwise, sped transportation or regular ed transportation, regular transportation. The 1/12 is looming. You know, they've talked quite a bit about 1/12 because the thought is that towns will not have an opportunity to have town meeting. And what does that mean? And so there's a lot coming, I think, in the next week or two that we're going to need to discuss. And again, some of this news is right off the press. And, you know, Anne Marie and I were speaking today that we have more guidance in regards to some of these issues. So I would say that on the educational front, we're doing well. I think on the food front, we're doing very well. On the financial side and with the implications, we're still trying to receive guidance because the state is still trying to receive guidance. So, or at least they're trying to get information how to guide us. So all in all, I think, you know, we're doing as best as we can, and we're doing well despite the circumstance.
Right. Thank you. I know one of the items that's come up recently is April vacation. And I wanted to just bring that up and put that out to you to find out what kind of feedback you've received. We're hearing a lot of districts have decided not to do April vacation. Others are. And I just wanted to put that out to you and find out your thoughts and what feedback you've received.
So probably about 2.5 weeks ago, or maybe a little bit longer, looking forward, because it's all about projecting on many fronts. I was, and still am, by the way, a very strong advocate for April vacation. Primarily, I will tell you that I think our teachers, I know our teachers and parents are tired. They need a break. Also, there's a financial implication as well, because although we're being reimbursed for meals at a certain percentage, there's still monies being spent in order to have folks come in and to pack those meals, deliver those meals, etc. So from my perspective, and I was pretty adamant about that, I felt that we needed to have April vacation. What folks have over time, some of our surrounding communities, they opted to forego April vacation to get out of school or start summer vacation 4 days earlier. We were about 5 snow days in already. This would bring us, again, I didn't bring my calendar because I had to change location so I could hear folks. But, when we were thinking about this and weighing in, I still did not think it was personally and professionally, I didn't think it was worth the 4 days, getting out 4 days earlier, just given the fact that folks are going pretty hard and have done a lot of work. And also, we've also made plans not to deliver meals during the April vacation. Again, I covered that a little bit earlier. And some of our teachers have already programmatically said to their families, to their kids, look, this is April vacation, and so work will not be assigned or during that time. So I think that in some cases, if you're a district who had 7 or 8 snow days up to this point, and we have several districts around us who do, it made sense to forego April vacation. Mr. Ivan, I can't remember the percentage, but when we did a loose poll, it wasn't overwhelming. I don't believe. I can't remember the numbers exactly.
We did a poll of the NDEA staff. That's 116 members. 96 answered the poll by the timeline when I gave it to Dr. Cassavant, and it was 60-40. Like the actual number was 57 point something, and then whatever, but I rounded it to 60-40.
Yeah.
60% of teachers wanted to 60% of teachers wanted to keep April vacation in place. No, 60.
Mr. Iben, you're muted. If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself.
Oh, no. So that whole thing?
Yeah, the
Okay.
whole thing.
Sorry. So we did a poll. It was 96 members out of 116. And it was a 60-40 split of those 96 members. So 60% of the teachers wanted to remove April vacation so that the school year would be shorter. 40% wanted to leave it as it is and have the vacation. Sorry about that with the mute.
So it was certainly not overwhelming when we spoke to our staff. You know, so again, a lot of we had, for obvious reasons, we had to make a lot of plans prior to the April vacation, that type of thing. So a quick turnaround or a quick change didn't seem to make a lot of sense for us on this end.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just
Sure.
add to that? I'm not sure when Mr. Iben did the survey, but I think it was before last week. Can you confirm that, Eric?
Yes, it was last week. No, it was before last. It was
Before
before
last
last week. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that has evolved as teachers have gotten deeper into the remote learning. That's all.
I don't.
Yep.
The people I've spoke to are very excited to go on April vacation. I have to tell you, I get a lot of feedback, and I have to tell you that people were in fact, you know, the folks who reached out to me were happy that we were having it. So.
Right, that was really my point, that it was 60-40, but it was a week and a half or maybe 2 weeks ago. And if we did it again, I wonder if, because my sense was that people were like, I'm ready for vacation.
And thank you for the feedback, Mr. Iben, and Dr. Kazan, of course, for your input and your recommendation. As we know, the school calendar is under the charge of the school committee. So the school committee could make a decision to forego April vacation if so be. We could leave it alone. We don't need to do anything. I wanted to put that out there to the committee, since obviously this is the first time we're really getting together as a group to discuss this. Mrs. Trifilo.
Yeah, I think that another key piece here is the parents, and they really haven't been able to weigh in on this, nor I don't believe we're even aware that this was one of our questions. So as you said, the school committee hasn't been able to discuss it. So I think it would be a surprise to the parents not to have April vacation.
Mrs. Chartier?
I think we're too late in the game to even really think about it.
Right.
I mean, April vacation's next week.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, so unless someone would like to make a motion otherwise, I'm going to close out the discussion on April vacation. Does anybody feel a need to make a motion otherwise? Seeing none, so April vacation stays as is on the books. So we will take vacation and our end date will be as planned. All right. Dr. Kazmat, was there anything else specifically you wanted to talk about with the update? I know there's a few other things we will get to as we cover other agenda items.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I think that covers everything from my report, because obviously the agenda really speaks to a lot of the other conversations. So we don't have to duplicate is what I'm thinking.
Great, thank you. Next up on our agenda is also a coronavirus related item, which is a change to the program of studies for the school year 2019-2020, which would be this current year. There's been a recommendation from the high school through our chief academic officer, Ms. Calise, to remove the the part of the program of studies that states that a student must take the AP exam in order to get the AP designation on their transcript. Since we know that there's been all sorts of issues with the learning piece and the administration piece, they've recommended we remove that requirement. And essentially what that would mean is we would update the program of studies and we would remove the following language from page 4 of the program of studies found under the advanced placement AP section, students choosing an AP course. It says the AP examination is a requirement for anyone choosing to take an AP course. Students who choose not to take the examination are required to pay the examination fee of $20 along with losing the AP designation on transcript. The course will be changed to pre-AP on the permanent record and the grade point average calculated. For college-bound seniors, a notice will be sent with the final transcript mailed to the college of the student's choice, indicating the change on the transcript. This fee is subject to change. So that paragraph would be struck from the program of studies, leaving only there's a cost associated with taking the AP examination at the end of the year. Last year, students were required to pay $94. Students currently on the free and reduced lunch program are entitled to a discounted cost as determined by the College Board. So that is the only part that will stay. I would entertain a motion to remove the paragraph as read from the current year's program of studies.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Mason. Do I have a second?
Lori Mattson, second.
And I have a second from Mrs. Mattson. Are there any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. If I could get the committee to unmute themselves. Mrs. Mattson?
Aye.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes, so that motion carries unanimously. So if we could just alert the high school and the guidance that that has passed, they can ensure that it's processed properly as for the students in the AP classes. The next item is the actual program of studies for school year 2020 to 2021, which is next year. Everyone should have received and had a chance to look at the draft that was put together by guidance and that came to us through Ms. Calise after review. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the program of studies as presented? I'll ask that first if anyone has anything they want to say. See, oh, Mrs. Mattson?
Kate, I sent you an email with some suggested changes. Did you get that?
When was it?
I
Today.
did actually, and I, hold on one second. I did, and I made all the changes that you recommended. You're quite the proofreader.
I did that for.
Yeah, it's all set. It's in all of the changes. Most of them were grammatical. One of them was a suggestion to remove language in the description that says to you know, successfully take the MCAS. And I agree with you, that shouldn't be in there. I left it in one case because the course is specifically to help students do that, but otherwise it's not relevant. So that was the only real language change. Everything else was just grammatical or spacing. And I re-PDF'd it, if that's actually a verb, and shared it with Susan so that should it be approved with those changes, it's ready to go.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2020 to 2021 program of studies, including the changes that Mrs. Mattson has provided to Ms. Calise that has been wrapped up into the program of studies.
So move, Lori Mattson.
I have Mrs. Mattson did make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second from Mrs. Kojal. Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, if the committee would unmute themselves, we'll do roll call. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason, Mr. Mason, I couldn't hear you. If you could try again.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Mason, I heard an aye. Mrs. Robichaud.
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you. Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
and Mrs. Hughes says yes. We have unanimously approved the program of studies for next year, which is 2020 to 2021. Thank you for the hard work that was put into that. Ms. Calise, I know that you gave a final look-see, but please send along our appreciation to Mrs. Vassal and the guidance team that looks through that with a fine tooth comb every year to ensure that we have the right courses being offered. All right, next up, the business manager's report. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Geister.
Yeah, we'll start with grants. Right now they're business as usual, but there's, as everything else, there's lots of guidance coming down to waivers being issued to extend them beyond their normal end times. There's no real definite answers to those yet. There's really, other than salaries, that's all that's being spent out of them right now, because most of it is used for professional development, and that's all on hold and non-existent at the moment. So those basically, there's really nothing to say. I mean, I still request the money as we are spending it for the salaries, but I would think that they're probably going to come to a standstill in the next couple of weeks until we get some guidance as to how the rollovers and all of that will finish them out for the year. One big thing that I want to point out to you is that the cafeteria revolving fund is out of money. So I've had to move all of their salaries over to the general fund in order to keep paying the staff to do lunches. There's a little bit of money, which I'm hoping once he gets to do his claiming for the meal reimbursement, will go into the revolving, and that will continue to cover his supplies. So right now, this past month, the bills that we just voted on, there was enough money to cover those bills for him, but all of his salaries for all of April and the last week of March had to be moved over to the general fund. And we'll have to talk more about what that is going to do for us in a finance meeting, and when I get time to put together more numbers to see what that is really going to look like in the long run. So that's really the big item for today's report.
Great. Do we have any idea when the potential reimbursement would happen?
They have not even opened up the March claim yet for him to do, because there was a lot of different hoops that you had to jump through in order to get yourself designated as a location to be able to deliver those meals. We, as a district, only had one school that qualified, and that was Phillipston. So we had to apply for, I guess, waivers to say, yes, we're delivering and we have other meal locations. So that was one hurdle. And now, because we have all those different designations, he now has to apply for reimbursement stating how many meals are served from each of those locations. But because March was half regular and half of this new program, they haven't figured out a way of how they're going to have people claim the month of March. So those funds are slowed down because they haven't even opened up the portal for him to report his numbers the old way and the new way. So I don't know when we're going to see that come.
Thank you. Not surprising.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions or comment for Ms. Geister at this time? I know we said we'll do a finance meeting soon, so we could talk about that towards the end when we want to schedule that. But is there anything that anyone wants to address tonight? Okay, seeing no comments, we can move on to our next item, which is the strategic plan update. I'll turn that over to Dr. Cazavan and Ms. Calise, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. So, most of this, again, as we look at what and how we are educating, the strategic plan, we've had to kind of put that kind of aside to some respect. But what I'll do is I'm going to have Kate just talk about, some of the things that we are doing that still, of course, that hit those important topics, our goals, et cetera. But I mean, ultimately, a lot of what we need to do, we need people here to do, certainly kids. But I'll turn it over to Kate so she can better explain. Oh, muted.
Am I able to share my screen? Yes, I am. Do you mind if I do so?
Please, whatever works for you.
Okay. So what I did was I looked at our strategic plan, in particular, the outcomes that we were looking for, and I made some updates in red that you can see here, and I'll share this. I think I already shared it with Susan so she can take notes or put it in the record. And you can see that most of our initiatives are on track, but of course some things have been derailed, right? So the first thing was about by the spring having teachers utilize ELA and math maps. This is really on track. Some courses at the high school are being completed as we speak, but they're in really good shape. So we're really on track with that. We talked about communicating instructional practices, and this is already in place. We had a learning walk, focus of inquiry. That's what that stands for. And if you click that link, you'll be able to see what that is focus of inquiry on student engagement, which is really what our instructional practices team had decided was a first step. Of course, and we've had our learning walk this year, but as a result of COVID, we had to cancel the additional learning walks. So we have the focus ready, it's articulated, it's been shared with all teachers, and everyone is throughout the district, pre-K to 12, is completely aware of what we're looking for. And we measure it through these learning walks, which we completed one at every building, but weren't able to continue that. The next thing is about math benchmarks. So we had said that by this spring, we would have reading and math benchmarks in place to inform interventions K to 8. So we have done that. That's been implemented through STAR. The last benchmark for elementary was January 16th, and for middle school was January 31st. So they had a beginning of year benchmark, and then they had a middle of year benchmark. The end of year benchmark will not be administered due to COVID-19. So that's an impact of the school closures, but the elementary interventions and middle school differentiation until the point that we left were informed by that data. Am I going too fast? The next one was that we'd have multi-tiered system of support for social emotional learning. I think that's also on track. We have SWIS, which is a data tracking system, which actually is something that we talked about for next year. And School Brains data, which inform our practices district-wide regarding social emotional learning. So we've done social emotional professional development district-wide, and practices in each building are informed by what they're learning about social emotional, what staff are learning about social emotional learning in students. So I would say that's on track as well. And this last one, I don't know if Chris can add to this, about schools having a communication plan, and I would say a formal plan has not been written to my knowledge, but each school definitely has a thorough and regular process for communicating with both staff and parents, families, I should say families here.
Exactly. So obviously those were was one of a couple of things that we started a little bit. We started the framework over the fall, and we, giving all the things that have happened this year, we got kind of derailed, but we were moving forward with a basic communication plan in general about how we would communicate X, Y, or Z. It was going to be part of a bigger plan in terms of outreach, etc. We have not, of course, we haven't been around to actually meet to discuss that, to even get it off the ground from where we left it in the fall. So no, we have not made any progress on that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are definitely strong practices in place, but not a formal plan. And it's funny, listening to Dr. Cassavant reminded me that before we had these COVID closures that disrupted us, we had significant, months of budget issues that really took our attention. So I think we're in a really good place with this plan, considering what this year has delivered to us.
Exactly. And some of the things that I'm talking about, of course, are every school has a Facebook page.
Yeah.
They have a web page. Those were some of the things that we put in place without actually creating the plan. Blackboard Connect is a big part of what we do and how we communicate things. So we certainly started putting pieces together, but again, in terms of a formal plan at this point, no, we don't have that. We don't have that completed.
I'm going to stop sharing unless anyone wants me to leave that up for a minute. Okay.
Thank you, Kate. That was a good update. It's as much as I don't want to say a lot of good things in the red. Maybe we could use a different color. But it's nice to see the significant progress in so many areas, even though some could say we've hit a brick wall in certain spaces. I know there's been a lot of really great work that's been done, and hopefully we can keep all that momentum going as we move forward. So anyone have any questions or comments on the information presented about the strategic plan? Seeing none, we will move on to the next piece of information, which is the FY21 budget update. And I'm just going to start with a little information. Dr. Cassavant mentioned there was this nice 3.5-hour meeting yesterday, which was a little rough on the ears because the technology was not good. It wasn't, I don't want to say it was a doom and gloom presentation by the powers that be and several interested parties, but it was basically a doom and gloom presentation. Revenues will be down, it'll take forever to come back. We don't have enough data to really make those projections, but that's what we're going to tell you. So I think we're going to find that we're up against a very conservative legislature when they start looking at the FY21 budget. Normally by this time, the House would be close to, if not already, have given us some indication where they were thinking about based off of the governor's numbers that were released in January. It's really looking like they're not even prepared to discuss this yet. I think, as everyone's may or may not have heard, the governor has pushed through requests for legislation, and the legislators have responded with various bills that he signed in, giving municipalities the ability to go into 1/12. He then later passed a bill for regionals, because they weren't included in the original one, for us to go into a 1/12 with the, DESE having some input into that, so that as towns need to push out their elections or their town meetings based upon how quickly things can, I don't want to say get back to normal, get back to a new normal, we won't be operating with no dollars. We'll at least have potentially 1/12 to work with. So there's been some direction as to what we can do. The other thing I thought was interesting is the Student Opportunity Act that we voted on, our submission in March, because it was due April 1. Well, guess what? Last week in April, after the due date, it was approved to push that out. And it was my understanding that even though the due date hadn't been moved, there were many districts who did not provide their approved plan, but we've already got ours done, so that was a good thing. So yeah, I think on the budget front, at the state level, it's not looking very good. I think might have said it, I forget which meeting, but sometimes being in hold harmless, it helps you because we weren't getting a bunch of new money. So there's really nothing for them to take away. So in some ways, we're insulated from some of the potential cuts that could be made for new monies, but we don't know what that'll mean for the existing budget. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Casavant because I know the town of Templeton had a budget hearing that he participated in, and then to provide any other information on FY21 at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So, gosh, it seems like a million years ago, but presented the budget, and again, it was more or less about presenting a number that was pretty widely known. I think that one of the things that we did, or we did certainly a lot better, is we communicated a lot earlier than we normally had in the past. And so certainly what we received were, there wasn't a lot of questions. I think that the number at that moment in time, that was a budget number that was pretty set in stone from Templeton's perspective. We hit that number. If it was simply about hitting a number, one of the things that several points that I brought up is that one that that kind of minimal increase, can't happen every year, given what we're, about relocating students, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you can only do that really once, quite frankly. And, that certainly by us reorganizing and really looking very closely at the positions that we do have and what we need, et cetera. So it wasn't, the presentation was short. The questions were not many, although one of the interesting questions that I did receive is that, you've cut your budget by $1 million. You've saved $1 million if Phillipson has to relocate its, students. And that's not, I want to say again, that's not true. The fact is that that's net, the net result is certainly not $1 million. If the building costs $1 million to run with salaries, et cetera, then, but that's one thing, but we plan on using services and people from that building, like the nurse, et cetera. I mean, we could go on, we've already presented this, but that in the end, it wasn't $1 million savings. It wasn't. It was never going to be whatever the total cost for Phillipson was going to be in any regard, because it certainly just wouldn't be, just by reallocating the students. There are staff issues. There's not staff issues, but you have staff who will contractually bump other teachers, et cetera. So, I think that, we handled the question fine. I think that the information got out there. I think everyone understood. I know that Mr. Mike Curry, expressed that. I know that Mr. Terenzini also expressed thanks, and also, made sure that folks know that that it wasn't just a clean $1 million, savings right off the bat. So ultimately, that's how the presentation went. But as we move forward into 1/12, which we all think that we're going to be, just because towns will not have the opportunity to meet en masse to create a budget or to vote on a budget. Yeah, I guess the one thing about being held harmless or being poor is that you're a poorer district, is that you don't have a lot of money to lose, and you're kind of used to kind of, making do with what you have. So I I think we have a lot to deal with moving forward. I think I do. We don't know what it is because we don't know what DOR and DESE will ultimately decide, and we need a budget, right? We need a budget from the state in order to activate those type of decisions. So we could be in 1/12 for a bit. I think that that's what they're trying to say is that, in best case scenario, it's certainly maybe by the summer, right? That we'll be able to have some of these meetings, or if they think of a way to do it remotely, I don't know. But FY21, we're moving forward because although 1/12 would indicate that you'd have FY20 monies, right? Or a number to carry over through FY21, if that was the case, that still doesn't derail our plan, right? We still need to move forward as we've been talking about to that FY21 objective, because it's where we're going to be ultimately, if not, God forbid, worse in terms of money. So I think we're positioned well. I think we've done a nice job planning and communicating out what needs to happen. Now it's just about waiting for the state to come up with whatever number and then responding to that as well.
Great, thank you. Just for the record, so everyone knows, we have not met with Phillipston as of yet. Normally, the Finance Committee in Phillipston would have a meeting. They have canceled their meetings as of right now and haven't started them back up yet. So once they start up and then ask us to be put on the schedule, we'll make an arrangement to go speak with Phillipston as well as to the number. And the other piece of that that Dr. Kazman alluded to is, we rely on the towns for the assessments that they provide us so that we can operate. And if the towns go to a 1/12, obviously there's no question we will. We're going to have to. And we have yet to hear anything yet about changes to election dates or town meeting dates from either town, but that will have a huge impact on how we can move forward. So we'll keep everyone up to date and in the loop with that as we move forward. So one of the things with the FY21 budget, when we took our vote at our last meeting, that we failed to do in preparation for the configuration change we're presenting is our next agenda item. So this kind of ties into FY21. Our regional agreement in section 12 has an assignment of pupils that refers to if over 10% being from out of town. And the assignment of pupils says that pupils shall be assigned by the superintendent of schools, who shall take into account but not be bound by any recommendations of the school committee, consistent with the Educational Reform Act of 1993, provided that any time the assignment of students results in more than 10% of the pupils of the whole school being from out of town, then that reassignment shall require a 7/8 school committee vote in favor. So-called school choice students shall be exempt from this requirement. Since we are moving the elementary population from Phillipston into the Templeton Elementary School, we should take a vote to suspend that 10% requirement by that 7/8 vote. And we should have done it, as I said, when we did the actual vote for the budget, because by voting for the budget, we have in essence said that we are going to do this. So to make it formal, I wanted to present this to a vote for the committee. So I would entertain a motion from someone that, as per the requirement of the regional agreement, section 12, assignment of pupils, to allow the assignment of Phillipston students at Templeton Elementary School to exceed 10% of the resident student population in that building. Do I have a motion?
moved.
That's Mrs. Kojal. And do I have a second?
Second.
And Mr. Mason seconds. Are there any questions or comments from the committee on that? Seeing none, I will move to a roll call vote. So if the committee could unmute themselves. Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Mason? Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So we actually have a unanimous vote on that. So for the purposes of being in compliance with the regional agreement for next year, we have voted to allow that the assignment of pupils to be over 10%. So thank you to the committee for that. Thank you to Dr. Kazavant for remembering that we should have taken that vote. Next up is school choice for FY21. When we met last time, we had said we would put off making a formal decision because we were still gathering some information. Dr. Kaz.
Oh. I don't know that we heard you, Ms. Hughes, or maybe it was me. I'm not sure if something happened on your end or mine. I'm sorry.
I froze. At what point did I stop talking?
The beginning. The beginning.
The very beginning, actually. Yeah.
Of the school choice?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we heard the vote and that's okay. Okay, so what I had said was just that school choice for FY21, when we met at our last meeting, we said we were not in a position to make a decision and that Dr. Kazavant would go back and research and put together some information.
She froze again. Okay.
Oh, gosh.
Although you froze, I think I know what I'm saying at this point. So what we did, again, another month went by. We have not had a change in our student population. So at all, we have not had anybody move in. Obviously not school choice in or school choice out. So again, given that we're really talking about projections, and we're talking about, again, we've talked about those at length during the budget process, that certainly I do not support, and I don't believe that we could support, just given the numbers that we've spoken about it, that we could take any students, any school choice students, pardon me, grades 1 through 8, absolutely. I believe that the high school, and K, we could wait. Those would be situations where we would wait normally. There's a lot of movement, again, at the end of the school year, especially at the high school level. Kindergarten, we have just started our registrations, literally had just started putting information out. And, but so we're kind of at this point, being that it's April, by May, we will certainly know if anything has changed. But my recommendation is that we still, stay a school choice accepting district, but we close the grades 1 through 8 at this point in time, because no matter what happens one way or another, our numbers are just too high per class to accept any students at this time, school choice for next year.
Okay, so your recommendation then would be to act on not accepting school choice for grades 1 through 8 for school year FY21, and we'll address kindergarten and when we say kindergarten and 9 through 12, make sure I had that
Thank
right.
you. Yeah, sorry.
We'll address that. We'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting. And if we're in a position at that point for you to make a recommendation on those grades, we'll go forth. But in May, the latest, we'll have an answer for that. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the school choice recommendation as of today? Because I think our parents who were potentially looking for placement in 1 through 8 need to hear us say that we can't take these students, if that's so what the committee will now vote, so that they can make alternate arrangements if that's what we ultimately vote on. All right, so I would entertain a motion from someone to not accept any students in grades 1 through 8 for school choice for the school year 2020 to 2021.
So moved.
Mrs. Trifilo makes that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think that Mrs. Kojal, maybe? Yeah. All right, or Mrs. Mattson, was that you? I don't know. Okay.
No, I think it's
Mrs. Varney's
Mr.
got
Mason,
it.
I believe.
Okay, all right. Anyone have any questions or comments on that? As I said, we'll vote on kindergarten and the high school later, but this at least will alert parents of our intent. So if there are none, then if everyone on the committee could unmute themselves, we'll do a roll call on that. And again, this was the motion not to accept school choice in grades 1 through 8 for the school year 20 to 21. Mrs. Matson?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Mason? I see him saying yes. Yes. Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Okay, there I hear Hank coming in late. And Mrs. Hughes says yes, so that motion passes unanimously. And as we said, we'll get an update at our next meeting on kindergarten and the high school, and a recommendation if we're ready to do so at that time at our next meeting. Thank you. Next up is school committee comments. Anyone on the committee like to say anything at this point?
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Mason? Mrs. Mattson?
Just wanted to thank God, I can't remember his name now. The one that
no,
did the 3D,
sorry.
the 3D plastic parts for the masks, Gagnon.
Mr. Gagnon.
And I don't even remember now where I read it was an email or something about him doing these parts of the masks for Hayward Hospital. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yes, so Mr. Gagnon, his wife is a nurse. And so there had been a lot of chatter on Facebook, honestly, and on the web that 3D printers were being used to do a lot of different things. So, Mr. Gagnon took it upon himself, asked, of course, he did all the appropriate things, but brought the 3D printer basically home because you can't do it here. And he started to make the frames and for the mask itself. So the first run of it, I think he did 50. I think the first box went in with his wife, actually. It brought 50. And I haven't checked in lately, but I think that he was on the move for another 50. I believe he has all 3 of the 3D printers up and running doing this. And other people not associated with the school are in line to donate the plastic or the material, right? So they've got a pretty good network of folks who are, again, outside of our school family, who are banding together to do all kinds of things. And one of them is to provide the materials for Mr. Gagnon to continue to make the shields. Yeah, it was it's fantastic stuff. It really, really is.
And that's pretty much, I couldn't come together with all that.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank him anyway. I thought that was really wonderful that he was able to help out in that way.
Mhm.
So I want to thank him.
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Lori, for bringing that up. That was wonderful, Mr. Gagnon. Anyone else would like to say something? Okay, think we're good at this point for school committee comments. The next item under new business has to do with donations for food services. This motion is really to allow donations that come in for the food services group to be accepted by either Dr. Casavant or Ms. Geister as the business manager. Normally, any donation that comes in has to be accepted by the school committee. And since time is of the essence, especially when it comes to the food that we may receive or cash donations to help us procure items for the food, we wanted to go ahead and present a motion that would, the motion would read that we would move to allow the superintendent or the business manager to accept any and all Oh boy, did I freeze again?
You froze, yeah.
Yeah.
Any of
To
what I
make a
said.
motion, the last I think I heard. I don't know, yeah.
I'm sorry, my internet is, I'm at work and this is bizarre. I don't know what's going on. I'll try again. So I would entertain a motion that we move to allow the superintendent or business manager to accept any and all donations to the food services program on behalf of the school committee. And a report would be provided to the school committee of any and all such donations for review during subsequent public meetings. So I would entertain a motion to do that.
So moved. Vicky
Mrs.
Chartier.
Makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs.
Lori
Mattson.
Second.
seconded that, and Mr. Mason also seconded it. Any questions or comments on that? Nope, seeing none, we'll move to a vote.
Question.
Sure.
Did we actually get a donation, or we're just doing it in case we get donations?
I'll check with Dr. Casvan. Have we received? I don't believe we've received anything yet. This isn't just in preparation.
No,
Okay.
sometimes people call us or they'll ask us, and truthfully, if we're contacted with food items, dry goods, et cetera, we're pointing them towards the Templeton, food pantry. But in the situation where if we were to, if an organization were to donate, food items for kids, we want to be ready to do that. But when I say smaller, if it's not able to, to satisfy what we're doing for, the 90 plus meals, we're pushing it towards the Templeton food pantry. But this is in case something bigger comes along.
We actually received a monetary donation. Mr. Podrazik and myself applied for a grant, but we didn't qualify. But because of all of our efforts and all of the meals that we're serving, the foundation, I guess, felt bad for us, and they sent us a check for $1,000 unrestricted to use for whatever part of the program we needed it for.
Nice job.
Nice. So we should probably, if that monies were received prior to this, should we amend the motion to include the acceptance of that donation as well, just so that we make sure we're in compliance?
It's from
Yes.
the EOS Foundation. It's $1,000.
Okay. So could I have someone, and maybe Mrs. Chartier, since you motioned up front, that we amend our original motion to include the acceptance of that $1,000 donation from the EOS Foundation?
I amend the original motion to include that $1,000 from the POS Foundation.
And my
I
second, and that was Mrs. Mattson. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, nice job applying for that.
Let's do a roll call vote. If the committee could unmute themselves. I have Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason. I'll come. Ooh,
Aye.
okay, we have an aye. Mrs. Robichaud? Mrs. Robichaud? if you could-
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Mrs. Robichaud?
Aye.
She might be frozen.
There we go.
Mrs. Kojal? I
Yes.
think- Yes, okay. Mrs. Ruffalo?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Okay, you're Mrs. Robichaud, yes. Mr. Marks, I actually couldn't hear you. Could you just unmute and say it again?
Yes.
Yes, so Mr.
Yes.
Marks says yes, and Mrs. Hughes says yes. So I believe I have everybody, and we are all audible with our yeses, so that would be a unanimous donation, a unanimous vote for the donations. Thank you. Love technology.
James's smile is making me giggle.
Bring joy. I don't know what to say.
There were no other items that came to our attention within the 48 hours, so there are no new items that came up. I will turn it over to Dr. Casavant for a superintendent report. I think he's covered almost everything, but just in case there's anything else he'd like to say, I'll throw it over to him.
Honestly, Madam Chair, that, really ultimately we're just focusing on the things that we're talking about, these kind of low frill meetings, not a lot of information other than just the day-to-day, education of our kids has been at the paramount. So I know that, we're continuing all the hard work that we're doing. Again, I want to thank the teachers, the staff members, central office, really, really great team. Just a lot of stuff going on, and they handled it, honestly, they're handling it beautifully. There's a lot changing, and they really do go with the flow quite well. So honestly, no, I have nothing further until the next time we speak, or till tomorrow, when they change something else up.
Okay, next up was curriculum and instruction. I don't know if Ms. Cleese, you wanted to touch on anything specifically, speak to the remote learning plans, or anything else that you wanted to add that we haven't already gone over? Oop, you're muted.
I just wanted to quickly show you one thing that I thought was interesting. I was thinking what would be interesting to share that I could communicate in this environment. So among the very few things I can collect data on is Footsteps to Brilliance. So I just wanted to show you what the usage has been during this COVID closure, because I was curious about this myself. So this column is before the closure. I took data from August 1st to March 13th. When we closed, it was 32 weeks, and it showed these results that kids read about 307,000 words per week, 208 books were written and created by students per week, 72 hours reading per week. And during the 5 weeks, I can't believe it's been 5 weeks of closure, you can see that the numbers have dropped, but there still has been significant work done by students using this reading program, which, as you probably recall, is birth, I say that loosely, birth to grade 3. So probably about half, or a little more than half, of the reading and exposure using this program. But I think, considering the circumstances, that's pretty good. I just wanted to share that.
That's excellent. It's funny, I was thinking about our Footsteps to Brilliance program and how it was going to tie into the remote learning plan. So it's good news that it is being utilized by
Right.
the students, and obviously from home. So that's great news.
Yeah. So that's
Madam
really,
Chair, sorry.
I'm just going to get rid of this screen. If anyone, I'll share it with Susan so she can attach.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, I did have one last thing, and it just fell off my page, and I just realized I wrote it down but didn't state it in either opportunity. As I sent out an email, I think it was on Friday, last Friday, Ms. Vassal attended her resignation on March 3rd. But we knew that she was endeavoring to work elsewhere, and we had posted the position several weeks back. We had 25 or so candidates apply for the position, which then was narrowed down to 6. the COVID, crisis took place at that point in time. So much of this had to be online, as I wrote to the committee. And finalist interviews were conducted. So from the 6, 2 top finalists were selected, and I interviewed both of them with Kate Calise last week. And as I had written, that my final selection was Mr. Colby Young, who currently is the assistant principal for the high school. Again, I know a lot of the information kind of jumped, ahead forward. I believe there was and it was, believe it or not, it was unknown to Miss Vassal that an article from Nantucket had made its way to Facebook, etc. It wasn't by her doing, and that so some information, it wouldn't have gone that way if she didn't know that they were going to put anything out, and I had yet to been informed that she actually accepted the position formally. She was very upfront with me throughout the entire process. So again, on Friday, I sent that email out not only to the school committee, but out to the high school staff as well. It was out on Facebook before I could do both at that point in time. So I wanted to make sure I added that to the record, so to speak. And at the meeting, Ms. Vassal has been fantastic. But she wanted to, her dream job, as she puts it, on the island. So it doesn't surprise me that she was selected. Mr. Colby Young will do a fantastic job. And he was, throughout the entire process, one of the top candidates, for consideration. So I apologize for not saying that earlier. I had just literally forgot to turn the page on my notes. So.
Okay, that's wonderful news that Mrs. Vassal has found her dream job a few times in life. That comes across, so that's exciting for her. Congratulations to Mr. Young for his appointment. I'm assuming now we'll be seeing a posting for the vice principal position.
Yes, so we're in the process of getting that together. We also had a resignation last week, or a little week and a half ago, in terms of from our tech department as well. We are posting that position. It's already been posted, but so we've had a couple. Business goes on. It's just a little bit slower, as you can imagine. And so we do have that, but yes, that position will be posted.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to, I believe it is probably be the last big thing on our agenda, which is the only subcommittee report that we'll do this evening is for policy. And we have some second readings of policy that we'd like to put forth for second reading and adoption. And I'll turn it over to Mrs. Kojal to go through what those policies are. And she just needs to unmute herself. Oh, there we go.
Oh, we go. Sorry. Okay, the first one is JFBB, and it's a new policy, and it sets policy for the district for school choice in accordance with BESE regulations and DESE guidance. KDD is also new, and it sets policy for district for interaction with news media. KE is a proposed update, and it's about public complaints, and it's updated for language and to incorporate KEC, which we are going to delete down below, which is the next one. KEC proposed deletion, public complaints about the curriculum or instructional materials. And we have incorporated this into the update for KE. KHA proposed update, public solicitations in school, updated for language, best practices, and clarity. And the last one is KHB, proposed update advertising in schools, and it's updated for language and best practices. Do we have a motion to accept those for second reading?
Okay, the committee will take themselves off mute. We'll take a motion.
Hey, Margaret, I actually have a couple questions before we do that.
Sure.
So on going back to JFBB, okay, that one just confuses me a little bit, where it talks about, so once we take a student in from school choice, part of the district, why would we discriminate against them? Well, maybe that's not a good word, but discriminate against them in the placement of classes. That just seems a little bit odd to me.
That verbiage comes directly out of the Bessie and
I'm
Becky
done,
guidance.
Margaret.
I don't know. Yeah, so that language comes directly from the board and the district. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. So that's where that language comes from. That's part of their guidance. And I think what it's referring to is if you were to accept them and it would bump out a resident student from a program that was offered, which I don't think we have, and I'll allow maybe Dr. Kazavan or Ms. Calise to jump in if there's something that they could even think of would apply to us.
It could be something, I guess, grant related, I don't know, not grant related, but maybe it was a town, a town initiative that said that a child from, the high school from Templeton with the highest GPA or something to that effect. I think something to that effect. I am literally scrambling for an example, but I cannot think of one that we have or otherwise, but something to that effect.
Okay. It just seems a little bit odd to me. Okay.
It won't be an educational piece. It certainly wouldn't be a class, math, ELA or something to that effect. Somebody wouldn't get bumped out of an AP course, for example. I think it's beyond that. It's programmatic more than just the educational piece.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Jeff?
It does answer my question. Yeah, it just seems very odd to me, especially when you go down to number 7 and it talks about the discrimination. It just seems like with discrimination against, geography, but.
So here, here's an example. When kids, 8th graders apply to Monty Tech, they come into Narragansett Middle School, they interview X amount of kids. It doesn't matter where most of them are obviously from either Templeton or Phillipston, but they also interview kids who are school choice, okay? When they apply that, so we all have allegedly, these caps, et cetera. They're not going to not take so it's ranked, but you're ranked, those numbers go back to, they're applied against whoever the school choice district is that we are receiving them from. They're not going to take away slots from Templeton or Phillipston kids because in some weird ranking that somebody from another town ranked higher, when they did their interviews or et cetera here. They are compared to the students back in their hometown, wherever they school choice from. I think that would be an example.
Yeah, and my guess is if you read through that frequently asked question section, there's got to be someone somewhere that probably had an exception to something that was done, because some of those FAQ questions are really targeted to specific examples. And I can't see a reason here. I'll reiterate what Dr. Kazavan said that would really apply to us educationally that we have. So, all right. Any other questions or comments on the policies? All right, so we had a motion, right? Do we have a motion? I'm sorry, we need to get a motion. So a motion to accept the second reading and implementation of the policies that Mrs. Kojal reviewed. Do I have a motion?
Make that motion.
Mrs. Mattson makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I had both Hank and Mr. Marks. Second, if the school committee can unmute themselves, we'll do a roll call on that if there are no other questions. Hearing none, right? Okay, hearing no questions. Mrs. Matson,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
okay, Mrs. Robichaud,
Yes.
Yes.
There we go.
Mrs. Kojal? Yes. Did I hear yes, Mrs. Kojal? I'm sorry. Oh, I can't hear you, Mrs. Kojal. I'll come back to you in just a second. Who am I next? Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal, let's try again.
Yes.
Okay, now we heard you. And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So it was unanimous
Yes.
to accept the policy. Lots of yeses as written.
Okay.
All right, so thank you, Mrs. Kojal, for presenting those. Next up, we had correspondence. I don't believe we have any correspondence that has come in for review. So there's nothing.
Yes.
Yeah. That was a yes from the last section, I believe. So the next item is our next school committee meeting. And we've got a school committee meeting that we put on the books, a new one that I believe Mrs. Varney had emailed everybody about, that we'd like to plan a meeting for Wednesday, April 29th at 5 p.m., held virtually, obviously. And that hopefully will, if there's anything else that comes up in between now and then, there's so many moving parts right now. We want to just be proactive and make that scheduled meeting. So I hope everybody's added it to their calendar. And then the meeting after that would not be until May 20th. And that's another reason we've added this meeting, because there's a lengthy time period between now and May 20th. So our next meeting will be Wednesday, April 29th at 5 o'clock. And other than that, that's all I have on my agenda. Does anyone have anything, parting comments before we sign off? Seeing none, if the committee could unmute themselves, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved.
I've got a couple of movements to adjourn. I think Mrs. Trifilo just beat Mr. Mason in. Do I have a second?
Second.
And it looks like Mrs. Chartier seconded. Mrs. Matson,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
Mrs. Robichaud,
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo,
Yes.
and Mrs. Hughes says yes. Thank you to everybody for attending this evening. And we will see everyone on the 29th.